Most people look up at the sky and see empty space together. I look up and see the invisible grid that holds the entire modern world together. My name is Alina. I was a lead RF network engineer for one of the largest telecommunications giants on the continent. Every single day, millions of people relied on the infrastructure I designed and optimized to run their businesses, make emergency calls, and live their digital lives. To keep a massive metropolitan area online, you don't just plug in a router. It requires ruthless network performance management and constant, aggressive troubleshooting across multiple generations of mobile telephony technologies. I spent over a decade mastering the delicate balance of legacy 3G and 4G networks while simultaneously deploying our cutting-edge 5G infrastructure. I was the one configuring the heavy-duty base stations and operating complex telecom hardware from top-tier manufacturers like Huawei and Nokia. When everything works perfectly, nobody knows your name. But the second the signal bars drop, absolute panic sets in. Society is exactly 3 missed messages away from total chaos. My job was to ensure those signal bars never dropped. I built automated protocols to balance the extreme data loads and keep the hardware running smoothly, even under the most brutal traffic spikes. But there is a dangerous trend in corporate telecom. The executives at the top only look at coverage maps and profit margins. They don't understand the physical limitations of the hardware, and they certainly don't respect the physics of radio frequencies. If you have ever had a boss who demanded you push a system far beyond its breaking point just to meet a deadline, keep watching. Welcome back to Scars and Silk. Hit that subscribe button right now, because today I am going to show you exactly what happens when an arrogant VP decides to ignore a senior engineer, cut corners on a multi-million-dollar 5G rollout, and completely black out a major city. The delicate balance of my network was completely shattered the day corporate brought in a new vice president of operations, Richard. Richard wasn't an engineer. He was an empty suit obsessed with cutting CapEx, capital expenditure, and securing his massive end-of-year bonus by bringing projects in under budget. He didn't care about the physics of radio frequencies. He only cared about the spreadsheets. And we were just weeks away from the biggest network stress test of the decade. The metropolitan area was hosting a massive regional football championship final. Hundreds of thousands of fans were going to be crammed into the stadium sector and the surrounding city blocks. At the exact same moment, they would all be live streaming, uploading high-resolution videos, and completely overwhelming the local cell towers. To handle this unprecedented data tsunami, I had designed a robust, state-of-the-art 5G standalone cluster for the entire sector. But to make it work, the architecture required expensive, heavy-duty load-balancing hardware and advanced cooling systems for the baseband units to prevent thermal throttling under the extreme traffic load. Richard called me into his office, pointing his expensive pen at his monitor. "Elena," he sighed, using that perfectly patronizing executive tone. "This hardware requisition is entirely unacceptable. We are launching the new 5G cluster next week, right before the championship game. But we are cutting these expensive load balancers. The standard legacy configurations will handle the traffic just fine." I stared at him in absolute disbelief. He was effectively asking me to launch a Formula One car with bicycle brakes. "Richard," I explained, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "During a major football final, the uplink traffic alone spikes by over 800%. Without the load balancers and proper carrier aggregation, the hardware won't just slow down. It will physically overheat. The network will completely collapse." He rolled his eyes, gave
gave me a condescending smile and delivered the line that destroys multi-billion-dollar companies.
I didn't back down. In network engineering, you don't negotiate with physics. I brought the predictive traffic modeling directly to his mahogany desk. I showed him the exact simulations of the RF propagation over the stadium sector. I pointed directly at the red zones on the heat map. I explained that without the proper load balancing hardware, the moment the traffic hits absolute node saturation, the base stations will automatically initiate a thermal shutdown to protect the internal silicon from literally melting. And when one tower drops, the thousands of user devices in that sector don't just stop transmitting. They immediately and aggressively try to connect to the next nearest tower, instantly overloading that one as well. It's a cascading network failure, I told him, tapping the grim projections on the paper. The entire metropolitan grid will fall like dominoes in less than 3 minutes. You will have a total blackout during the biggest broadcast of the year. Richard slammed the report back onto my chest. He was furious that a technical engineer was challenging his executive timeline. I am sick of you overly cautious engineers trying to sabotage my launch schedules to protect your bloated budgets, he snapped, his voice echoing out into the hallway. We are not delaying this launch, and we are not buying your expensive hardware. You are a bottleneck to this company's innovation. I stood my ground and told him that if he launched that 5G cluster in its current physical state, he would be entirely responsible for the catastrophic service level agreement breaches that would follow. He didn't hesitate. He fired me right then and there for gross insubordination. While I was still standing in the room, he picked up the phone and called my junior engineering team. He ordered them to immediately revoke my administrative access, bypass my safety parameters, and execute a manual system override to force the 5G standalone cluster online. He thought he was being a bold, decisive leader. He didn't realize he had just pulled the pin on a digital grenade and locked himself inside the room. I didn't scream. And I didn't cause a scene. I just calmly walked back to my desk to pack my things. As the junior engineers frantically began tearing down the safety parameters to execute Richard's manual override, I opened up the Linux terminal on my machine one last time. In modern telecom, the physical hardware is only half the battle. The real magic is in the automation. Over the past 3 years, entirely on my own time, I had written a series of highly advanced Python scripts running in isolated Docker containers designed to flawlessly automate the dynamic traffic routing. They were my personal safety net, my proprietary algorithms that rebalance the data loads across the network millisecond by millisecond, keeping the nodes from collapsing during traffic microspikes. Because those Python scripts were my personal intellectual property and definitely not listed on Richard's precious budget spreadsheet, I didn't leave them behind. I simply shut down the Docker containers, wiped the local instances from the test servers, and pushed my code to a private, encrypted repository. I want to pause the story right here. I am talking directly to every brilliant woman in engineering and tech who has ever been called paranoid, difficult, or a bottleneck simply because you understood the system better than the executives running it. Have you ever quietly built your own safety net only to watch an arrogant boss drive the project straight off a cliff? Go down to the comments right now and drop a satellite or a laptop if you know the absolute power of quiet preparation. And make sure you hit that subscribe button to join the Scars and Silk Network, because you need to see exactly how fast a city goes dark when they ignore the engineers. Back to the story. I handed over my security badge, walked out of the glass lobby, and drove home. The regional football championship final was exactly 48 hours away, and I knew exactly what was about to happen. The day of the regional championship final arrived and the stadium was packed beyond capacity. Everything was holding together by a thread until the final minutes of the match. The moment Santa Cruz scored the winning goal, making it a dramatic 3-2 victory, the stadium absolutely erupted. At that exact second, over 80,000 fans simultaneously pulled out their phones to live stream the celebration, upload high-definition videos, and video call their families. The uplink traffic hit the towers like a massive digital tsunami. Without my Python automation scripts to dynamically balance the data loads, and without the heavy-duty cooling hardware, the baseband units, BBUs, inside Richard's cheap 5G cluster instantly maxed out their processing capacity. The internal temperatures critically spiked. To prevent the silicon from physically melting, the hardware did exactly what it was programmed to do. It initiated a catastrophic thermal shutdown. The 5G nodes went completely dark. But a telecom network doesn't just fail quietly. When the 5G cluster collapsed, 80,000 user devices aggressively and automatically tried to connect to the older 4G and legacy 3G towers in the surrounding metropolitan sectors. The legacy radio access network RAN was hit with an unintentional, massive distributed denial of service attack from our own subscribers. The cascading network failure I had explicitly warned Richard about happened in less than 90 seconds. Like dominoes, the base stations dropped. Across the entire metropolitan grid, millions of screens flickered, signal bars vanished, and were instantly replaced by two terrifying words: no service. The live broadcast dropped dead. Point-of-sale systems and credit card machines at the stadium completely crashed. Ride-sharing apps went offline, stranding hundreds of thousands of people. Even local emergency dispatch lines began experiencing severe latency. Richard finally got his early, budget-friendly launch, but now the entire city was completely in the dark.
In the middle of a massive metropolitan grid collapse, the silence inside a network operations center, the NOC, is absolutely deafening. The fallout was instantaneous. The telecom giant was bleeding millions of dollars by the minute in severe service level agreement, or SLA, penalties. Corporate enterprise clients were experiencing 100% packet loss and infinite latency. The regional government was threatening federal intervention. Richard sprinted into the NOC, his face completely pale and sweating. He was screaming at the junior engineers, demanding they execute a hard reset on the base station controllers to force the towers back online. But you cannot simply turn a massively overloaded telecom network off and on again. The physical hardware had entered a hard thermal lockout state to protect itself from permanent silicon damage. Every single time the junior team tried to reboot the 5G cluster, the immediate aggressive surge of millions of user devices desperately trying to reconnect caused the network to instantly overheat all over again. It was a vicious, unbreakable cycle of hardware failure. Richard was watching his executive career evaporate in real time on the massive NOC monitors. Standard disaster recovery protocols were completely useless. Without my proprietary Python scripts to dynamically route the massive backlog of data and rebalance the traffic millisecond by millisecond, the physical network flat out refused to come back online. He was losing millions of dollars every 60 seconds. The entire city grid was completely paralyzed, and the only engineer on Earth who knew how to untangle the invisible web was sitting on her couch, drinking coffee and watching the chaos unfold.
At exactly 8:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was Richard, the man who had smugly fired me for being overly cautious was now hyperventilating. Through the background noise of the call, I could hear the absolute chaos inside the network operations center. He confessed everything. He admitted the hardware was in a permanent thermal lockout. The legacy towers had completely failed, and the company was facing catastrophic SLA penalties by the minute. He begged me to come back to the NOC and fix it. I sat at my kitchen island, opened my laptop, and took a slow sip of my coffee.
Richard, I said, my voice completely flat.
I don't work for you anymore. I am currently an independent emergency network restoration consultant, and I don't need to come to the knock. I have the proprietary automation scripts ready for remote execution right here. There was a suffocating silence on the line. He realized in that exact second that his entire career and the fate of the metropolitan grid were resting on the laptop of the engineer he had just humiliated. He frantically asked what my emergency rate was. My emergency consulting fee is a flat $1.5 million, payable immediately via wire transfer, I stated. And when the network is stable, I am taking over as the new director of infrastructure. My contract will feature a hybrid compensation model with a strict 70-30 split. 70% executive base salary, 30% guaranteed SLA performance bonus. And I get absolute veto power over all hardware budgets. You have exactly 60 seconds to get the board on the line to approve it. When you are bleeding millions of dollars in federal fines and facing complete corporate ruin, you don't negotiate. The emergency wire transfer cleared my account 10 minutes later. I didn't even put on my shoes. I stayed at my kitchen island, opened my encrypted repository, and executed the Python scripts remotely. My code seamlessly bypassed the panicked NOC engineers and injected directly into the core routers. Within seconds, the algorithms began dynamically routing the massive data backlog, balancing the load millisecond by millisecond. The Huawei and Nokia baseband units finally cooled down. At 8:32 p.m., the 5G cluster rebooted. The signal bars across the entire city instantly lit up. The grid was back online. But Richard's career was completely offline. The next morning, the board of directors ordered a full forensic audit of the blackout. They discovered his